Good evening and welcome to InDemand. I'm Trudy Kerr.
And I'm Jane Dennis, and tonight we are talking to two women on the topics of migration. As countries and communities become more diverse, we ask, what are the problems and the benefits to these changes?
Absolutely, and this evening we are joined by Dr. Maria Pisani, who is the director at the Integra Foundation, and by Alba, Cauci, who is the president of the Organisation of Friendship in Diversity.
First up, we speak with Alba. Alba, welcome. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking about some interesting and current topic at the moment, the topic of migration. You're the president of, and I'm going to read this so I get it right.
That's not fair, because I had to say it
yes,
off by heart.
She remembered it. The Organisation for Friendship and Diversity. Can you tell us about what that is and some of the work that you do?
Okay, well, we're a small grassroots NGO, and we were founded in 2009, a little bit out of the frustration of some young people who were seeing a lot of negative images and a lot of negative talk in the media at the time. And we decided to start working with children. So we wanted to have some activities that brought refugees, migrant children and Maltese together in a neutral space to get to know each other and just build connections and relationships. And that grew and blossomed into more activities, mainly with children and young people, but it's a lot also about bringing the Maltese community into this through youth volunteering and now intergenerational volunteering, and also bringing families to get to know each other. So that's...
Wow. So you've got, and this is a common theme, we've said this a lot, that when we talk to a lot of the guests that we have, that they dismiss their own part in how that came to be evolved, but you're the president. So what does that, how did you come to become the president of this?
Well, I was living in Italy in 2008, and a Maltese friend of mine was also living in there. She moved back quite in the thick of, the larger boat arrivals at the time. And she just dropped a line and said, do you want to be my left-hand woman in this? And I said, why not? And I moved back the next year, and then we created the organisation, and 2 years down the line, the executive committee changed. They moved into full-time work, and I continued, and I've been the president, managing it since then, through changes of volunteers and executive committees, continuing the work and trying to do more where possible, moving into advocacy and lobbying with other NGOs, and looking at networking overseas as well, so seeing who's doing the same things, learning from them.
Right.
But you were involved right from the beginning. I mean, these issues have become more and more apparent, and certainly in the last couple of years, right there in the news. But you were there before they became to the forefront, which they are now. But what, to get, sort of reiterate your question, get right down to the nitty-gritty detail, what is it in you that struck a chord and said, I need to get involved? Why you?
Well, I left home very early. I was 16, and I went to an international school in Italy. I was really lucky. I won a scholarship. And when I was there, I basically woke up to see the world and see how different people are. But at the end of the day, how everybody is really the same. And, different yet equal is basically the basis of our work. And coming back and seeing how other people, for whatever reason, were not being treated in the same way, struck a chord. It's very frustrating, especially when you don't see the difference. And it's also a big reason why we work with kids. Kids don't see the difference. So we try and use them to set an example to adults that once upon a time, you didn't see the difference either, so why do you now?
So that's like backward educating. That's starting with the younger generation and then using that to filter through to the older generation, right?
And it makes the older generation think a lot. It's very difficult to be nasty to a child, or to be rude to a child, or insult a child, but it's very easy to do that to somebody who's your own age. And the logic and the rationale behind it doesn't really make any sense. And very, very often it's founded on unfounded information or hearsay or assumptions and preconditions. And the things we don't think about often enough, which is why do we judge and think about people the way we do when we don't know them. So the idea was we want to do something simple, which is let people get to know each other, maybe allow children to make friends, and through that, just show people that, we're still all human, and that's the first thing that counts.
But there are, I mean, whether we like it or not, there are a series of assumptions that, and whether that's generated through the media or through people talking to each other or by their own experiences. What are some of the assumptions about migrants here in Malta?
Oh God, there's so many. I think now people do understand that migrants who come here for a founded reason. So a lot of the old assumptions maybe have gone out the door.
Okay.
But there's still a lot of, assumption that they drain the welfare system, that they're lazy, that they don't work. With us, we also see that some people assume that, African parents don't care about their children because they're maybe, let them play a bit more freely. Or
And can you dispel some of those myths in your experience? Yes. Have some of those assumptions rung true, or for the
most assumptions are untrue in the first place. I mean, people are people. Everybody's different. Some groups have good and bad, so there'll always be, a rotten apple in every group. But for me to dispel an assumption is quite simple. All the people I know, most of them work really hard to maintain their families. A number of them have more than one child. A lot of them are single-parent households, where the women, most of the time, work very long hours for very low wages, but they do so because they want the best for their children, like any other parent would. They don't really want anything different. They want their children to be educated, to grow up in a safe place, to be healthy. It's just people do things differently, and sometimes different creates confusion, different creates fear and friction and resistance. So different is difficult to deal with, so automatically it's pushed away. And for me, different is great, and everyone's different. So,
but different is in a lot of communities is scary. I can remember when I grew up, and I grew up in London. Been in Malta for 10 years, but I grew up in London, and there was always that, you could hear that little phrase that was so often used, that immigrants were coming here, or migrants, or whoever was coming here to take the jobs from the English, and that sort of, that belief, and that immediately, the minute that you start talking to somebody who has travelled to the UK, and I'm using that so that we're not specific to Malta for the time being, but the minute that you do meet somebody and you start having that conversation, you get past that fear. So I guess that's part of what you're doing as well, is trying to break down that fear, because so much of this, I believe, comes from fear. Fear of having the jobs taken away, fear of the unknown, fear of cultures that you don't know, fear of religions that you might not understand. Am I not right? Is that right?
100%. And I think it's fear of anything that is unknown. And that's the whole point, The Maltese are very funny, I think, sometimes. There's always, I'm not racist, but, or I know.
To be honest, I don't think that's specific.
To
the Maltese.
No,
I think that communities are like that, and I think I personally think that's generated from fear and a series of assumptions. You talked earlier on a little bit about women working hard, and some of them single mums, and as I understand, a lot of women come over with their children. Are there some issues within the migrant community that are specific to women, that make them a vulnerable community when they come to a foreign country? So less about why they've left where they come from, but when they come, are they particularly vulnerable as a community of women when they arrive?
Well, I'll start from the point that I'm not a big fan of deeming an individual vulnerable, because if you look at the resilience and strength that it takes individuals to actually get here and to take on the journey they've done, their resilience is extremely high. They're very strong people. This doesn't mean that they don't have specific needs, and that they're not more maybe likely to encounter issues which are specific to them. And yes, there are issues which are, directly related to women. I mean, there's a lot of issues in relation to sexual gender-based violence, and in some cases domestic violence, But I'm not a big fan of always starting from the vulnerable perspective. I like starting from the strength.
But there are issues specific to being a woman when they arrive in their point of destination, because we'll be talking about perhaps why people leave, but when they arrive, there are some things that are specific to women, because I think they are two very different communities, and not knowing enough about the community themselves. Is there support that's given to women particularly?
Yes, of course. I mean, as most of the time it's, I think, through NGOs. And there are people who work specifically with women. But I can give you an easy example to understand, rather than talking theory. I work with one mother of 3. She came here without her husband. Her children were all extremely young. So she works all the time. She works very long hours. So the question of care, who's going to care for her children when she's at work? She's a single mother. She has no necessarily didn't have any support around her at that point in time when she arrived. She had no network. But then her community helped her. But still, you come here alone, and you're not within the, let's say, traditional family unit, or what we conceive as that. And she still has to be the provider, the carer, all day, 24/7. Especially, this is even more difficult if you come here and your children aren't of school age yet, so you don't even have the care during the day or maybe the time say that you go to work. What if you come here with a newborn child or a child who's 1 year old and you still have to provide? So there are many challenges which they face.
But Alba, you've just done something that seems so key to me. You've just humanised that issue. You just said, let me give you an example. There's a woman that I know who's in this situation, and the minute that you humanise it, you start to strike a chord. Now, I don't have children, but for me, I'm suddenly thinking, wow, that must be, you're in a new place. You may not have chosen to come here. You've had to come here, maybe for whatever reason, and then you've got these children, and you've got to work all the time, and she's got to think about how she's going to support. And that's surely so much part of what you do. And I'm guessing that humanising it and breaking it down is a key role.
I think it's very much about that. I mean, I do understand that for me, most things which I take for granted and which are very easy for me to digest, in a lot of cases are assumptions that people, because they don't understand or because they're wary of how it will impact them in some form, directly or indirectly, they can't necessarily put themselves in a position where they think of just a person. It could be you, it could be your family. Yeah. It's the most important thing to remind people that these are situations which are somewhat extraordinary, but then when you come to the day-to-day, you can think about the worries that any other person, any other mother. I'm not a mother, I don't have children, but I feel for them very much. I love children, and I enjoy working with them because they teach you so much. And that's why for me, they've always been like the best face to put to the issue, because they never choose to come here. That's it. They don't choose their life. Sadly, they have no agency until they're old enough, and often we don't even give them that opportunity when they're adolescents. So there's a lot of things to think about.
Yeah. And there is, and we're going to talk about, and I'm already, I don't know about you, I'm already thinking I'm really wanting to get into more depth in this conversation. We do have to take a break. Already, I can't believe it. But please, don't go anywhere. Go make yourself a cup of tea, grab a glass of wine, whatever you want to do, and please do come back and join us in just a few minutes with this incredibly important topic.
Welcome back to In Demand, where we're talking about the very pertinent and topical subject of migration. And we've been joined now by Dr. Maria Pisani.
Maria, thank you so much for coming and joining us. And immediately already I'm realising what an important conversation it is that we're having this evening. We've been talking to Alba about the more practical role that she's pursuing and taking care of at the moment. And a lot of what you do is about education and about opening this subject up. Tell us, what is it that you do exactly? What is it that your job involves?
Well, Integra is also a small local NGO. We were established 10 years ago, essentially to address issues related to asylum. Over the years, we've developed and grown. It's a voluntary organisation. We rely on a team of volunteers that are totally dedicated to the cause, if you like. And it's based on 5 pillars. One is actually a development project in Guatemala, so that's something on the side. We do research. Most of my work is on advocacy. We have some small projects
Explain that to me.
Yeah, I was going to say.
All right, I'll get back to
Okay,
advocacy
good.
then. We have some small community projects related to inclusion in general, not just asylum seekers. For example, also working with Maltese older adults, for example. And then we have what's called Connect Culturi, and that's our community education team, and we provide English and Maltese lessons twice a week to asylum seekers and refugees. We run a drop-in centre with a library, access to internet, what I call survival English support, and just a safe space basically to hang out, and other small activities in the community. And advocacy, broadly speaking, I would say it has a strong educational element, in as much as we try to inform the general public, policymakers, service providers, on the experience of forced migration and other marginalised populations. And we work towards social justice. So initially it's a fight towards recognising and realising the rights of every individual that we live with.
Okay.
So you're an academic as well. Is that, and so how do those two things work together?
Well, I started university as a mature student, and at the time was working in social inclusion, but on other issues. I first got involved in working with refugees because I was running the first open centre in Malta.
Okay.
And that coincided with me doing my master's. So my master's focused on female asylum seekers. And then I continued to work in the field, and I did my PhD, and today I work as a lecturer, as my paid job. And essentially, yes, I marry the two. My academic work, which focuses specifically on young people and forced migration, and my activist work, if you like, well, one informs the other. It's a reciprocal relationship.
So there's an experiential piece going on here.
Oh, God, yeah, all the time.
And also behind you, there's a lot of facts. So you know the facts around what's happening, why it's happening, and statistics, I guess, which must help.
Well, I'm rubbish at statistics. I can never
I'm not
remember
asking for any.
anything.
I'm not asking for any.
There's kind of that, but yeah, obviously
more
I've
people
seen
of this
you know.
do this, yes.
But yes, it's very much a bottom-up approach. There's sort of a number of us that have been working in the field for a number of years now, including Alba and others. And we've developed quite an important body of knowledge, I think, that helps us understand the context and again, like I said,
Well, on the subject of understanding, I've been here 9 years. I'm English. I don't know what that makes me, an immigrant, a migrant, a refugee. I don't know what I am. So I've come here and I've been here for 9 years. But there's a lot of confusion, I think, about terminology.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And again, I really don't know what I am,
Yeah.
in more ways than one.
Yeah.
But can you talk us through some of the
clarification.
terminologies and give us an idea about what that is?
It's unfortunate, really, that the term migrant or immigrant in Malta has become synonymous with asylum seeker and a black face, as if the only migrants that we have in Malta are black and arrived illegally, which is also incorrect.
Which is it's probably a European thing as well, not just Malta.
I think that's very true. That certainly the term migrant has become hugely problematic. That's for sure. And I think we need to reclaim the term migrant, because ultimately all of our populations are built on migrants. You know, that's how we've grown, and that's how we've been so successful as human beings as well, thanks to migration. So the sort of official definition, if you like, of a migrant is a person that is living in a country not of his birth or nationality for, I think it's for 6 months or over.
Okay.
Something
We're
like that.
migrants.
You're migrants. You're
Yes.
migrants.
Wow.
I'm a returned migrant. I'm Maltese, but I was born in Germany, brought up in England, and came over when I was 17.
Right.
So I'm a returned migrant, and you're migrants. And of course, in Malta
I'm glad we had this as a show.
So am I.
You know, you're migrants. And of course, and I think that's the whole point, you know, there are thousands of migrants living in Malta. The majority of them aren't black, and they never applied for asylum. So you have the EU citizens. I think actually the greatest number of migrants living in Malta are in fact British,
yeah,
in
I
terms
would
of
imagine so,
nationality.
yes, yeah.
And then you have EU citizens, Italians, then there's also Scandinavians and what we call third country nationals, those people that are living in Malta not from the EU. So for example, North Americans, Asians, Filipinos, a Nigerian who hasn't gone through the asylum process.
Right, okay.
And then we have what we call asylum seekers, and let's call them asylum seekers. Basically, those people that have gone through the asylum process, which up until recently arrived by boat, but also can arrive by plane and apply for asylum when they get there. So we have 3 categories, if you like.
And to break that down, asylum seeking means what? If you're coming here and you're seeking asylum, what does that actually mean?
If you are applying for asylum, it means you're, in sort of lay terms, you are asking for protection, essentially. Now, the outcome of the asylum process, there are many different possible outcomes. The 1951 Geneva Convention was established in 1951.
I like what you did there. That was very clever.
She knows her dates. You see, that's being an academic.
That was post-Second World War, which essentially was established to address the horrors of these millions of people that were displaced post-Second World War. So essentially, we were looking for a way of protecting those people that were persecuted in their country of origin, so that these people would find protection somewhere else. And the 1951 Geneva Convention, which is part of international human rights law, is also transposed into Maltese law as well. Then we have alternative possibilities or possible outcomes through an asylum process. The interpretation of the 1951 Geneva Convention is very specific. Again, in simple terms, if I can prove that I, Maria, am persecuted, perhaps because of my political work, because of my sexual orientation, but essentially the persecution is personal, it's against me, then I would be protected through the 1951 Geneva Convention. If I can demonstrate that I am from Aleppo or from Mogadishu, where we know there is war, and the chances of me being hurt or killed in some way as a result of this civil war is high, then I will be granted what we call subsidiary protection. And the vast majority of asylum seekers that have arrived in Malta over the last 10 years or more have been granted some form of protection. In other words, they were fleeing war, conflict, or other forms of persecution.
When you put it like this, it all sounds very legitimate. How do people respond to the work that you do?
Well, it varies. And that we have good times and bad times. And unfortunately, the good times are in the bad times. I've never actually thought about that. I've just thought about, it's just dawned on me now. It's when things get really bad, and by that I mean, when people are dying in the Mediterranean all the time. People are dying in the Sahara Desert trying to cross. To take whatever route all the time. This isn't something that happens, once every 3 months, but every now and then, tragically, we have many deaths. You'll hear of shipwrecks of 300, 400 dead. And when people see these tragedies, I think that's when they're really moved, and we generally receive more support. There have been other times, for example, as NGOs, we were able to block the forced pushback through the European Court of Human Rights. We were vilified in some areas, but also received a lot of support by a lot of people in Malta as well. But generally speaking, I think the issue of asylum and forced migration in Malta, not just in Malta and elsewhere, and especially if we look at what's happening over the summer, is an issue that people are struggling to get their head around, struggling to understand, and there is, understandably, I think, an element of fear. So a lot of our work is about myth-busting, aside from the community development that we do, is about myth-busting, clarifying certain facts, being able to differentiate between a fact and an opinion, and I think above all else, fighting for the rights of all human beings and not just the privileged.
It's such an important topic to talk about, particularly at the moment, and I'm absolutely thrilled that we're doing it. We do have to take a break, but when we get back, we're going to be opening this subject up an awful lot more and touching on some other areas. And
opening a bottle of wine.
Oh yes, that always helps. So don't go anywhere. We're going to be back in just a few moments with more from InDemand.
Welcome back to InDemand, where we're talking to two women who are involved in NGOs in the area of migration. Ladies, thank you for joining us, and we've opened some wine now so we can relax a little bit more. It is a heavy subject, so it does lend itself to a serious nature. We've been talking about fears and anxieties and assumptions being made by people, not just the Maltese community, wherever refugees and asylum seekers find themselves. Do you think that having a more diverse and inclusive society can bring benefits to a country? What do you think, Alba?
I can't say anything other than yes.
Yes. Why do you think that?
Because I believe that strength lies in difference and complementarity. And the truth is, none of us know everything and are capable of doing everything. So the more diverse your community is, the more skills you have, the more opportunities you have, and the more things you can learn. So I can't.
I think it's not just about diversity, it's also about inclusion. And when you have communities or elements of communities or of society that are isolated, marginalised, ghettoised, it's not just bad for that particular community, it's bad for the whole of society. And I think when people are denied rights, that is also toxic for the whole of society. And we can look at what's going on in the Middle East and see where rights have been denied and the chaos it creates. And ideally learn from that. Now, I'm not saying that everything about the Middle East is just about denial of rights, but this is a big issue. And where we've seen historically a denial of rights, it is toxic. It doesn't work, and it doesn't work for anybody. I mean, I come from the UK and I come from London, so it is much more diverse anyway. So it's not. I'm not from Essex. My husband's from Essex, so I live in. I'm used to diversity, but there's still people who aren't happy with that because primarily, and this is why I liken it to Malta, is if you've lived, I think about parents and grandparents who've lived in a part of London all their life where there's not been a lot of movement. It's what they know. They know the people next door. They know the people in their village. They don't move around a lot. I think in the UK now people will move to another town or even another country, but it's what they know. And even a new neighbour who is of the same race or come from a broadly similar area or just up the road can be deemed as somebody who just needs to get to know. And in Malta, because it is a smaller community where people know each other a lot more than they do in other countries, I can understand where that anxiety comes from. Do you think that's a fair reaction from people? I think it's completely understandable. No, fear of the stranger is I would say a normal reaction, and it would be ridiculous to suggest otherwise, whoever that stranger is. But then we also need to look at the complexities with migration, and here I'll be frank. We have many different migrants, and some are more acceptable than others. So, for example, to be British is to feel quite privileged, and I don't want to generalize at all, whereas to be a migrant from Nigeria, well, there's a racialization process going on there where people are not just perceived as problematic, but also almost inferior. So I think it's very complex is what I'm saying, but ultimately things change through contact with the other. It's when you actually get to know a person and see this person as a human being, as Samuel, as James, as Margaret, as Maria, or as Miriam, or whatever, that you start to see the humanity.
Absolutely.
I think it's interesting because when I see a black face here, they're generally on the back of a dustbin picking up the bin bags from the street, and in the UK I can go and see a doctor who's black, or in any walk of society in the UK, a blackface doesn't mean or associate anything. So that seems to stem true.
And I've been here 10 years, and I've seen how things have changed. I mean, the issues that you ladies are addressing now have been accelerated over the last 10 years, for sure, since I've been here. Now, you were talking about these issues being quite complex, and it just has always occurred to me since I've been here, because I'm British and I am a visitor in this country. Essentially, I'm here because you guys will allow me to be here. There is a huge historical factor to all of this, the relationship between Malta and the UK and Europe, and also Africa and the Middle East and so on. And I do believe that that is the basis for a lot of people's preconceptions. I've taken, and I'm sure you have, don't ever take it for granted that I'm a visitor in this country. I've only just recently been stopped being called Mijnuna Blond Inglesa in the little hilltop village that I live in. But every time that somebody is warm towards me, I count it as a privilege. For me, it's a privilege. But there is that idea of inclusion. Can you see that complexity is...
I think things are changing a lot. And even in just the span of time that I've been back in Malta, because I was away as well for 6 years, and I see it obviously because I work with children. I see it in schools as well, and you see the reactions of people to the fact that, you know, all the refugee children I work with all speak Maltese. So it's some
Which
people are
is probably
surprised.
better than my children.
It's quite normal, but there
me.
still is.
And me.
There's always an interesting reaction from people. It's like, oh, you know. But another thing I wanted to say is that what definitely comes out from schools, and schools are very much like, you know, an example of where you see how things are changing, and you see how even what is Maltese and what we think is Maltese has changed a lot, because all the kids, and there's a huge percentage of the children in Maltese schools now who come from marriages from mixed nationalities, and it's sometimes visible, sometimes it's not, but there are challenges, don't get us wrong, we can transpose all the challenges in relation to migration into schools as well, and from the fear of the unknown to the difficulty of dealing with a diverse classroom. But the children are really, in my opinion, very much a catalyst for change. And I think I always have obviously a positive outlook on things while trying to be as critical as possible, but it's so evident that we are moving away from what, you know, the traditional idea and concept of Malta is.
One of the articles I was reading when I was researching for this show, I was looking through some previous articles in newspapers, and one of the arguments that I came across was the disproportionality or the unfairness of people coming to Malta. So, you know, statistically, people are coming here first, and that there's a disproportionate amount of refugees or asylum seekers coming to Malta. I think one of the statistics thrown around, and I don't know whether this is true or not, this is merely a newspaper, it was somebody's opinion, saying that the UK would have to take 2.5 million, the equivalent of 2.5 million asylum seekers to have the same proportional...
Wow!
Yeah, and that is the case. There are what we call containment policies. Now, the first containment policy that the EU and other the richest regions of the world have adopted is let's start first of all with getting a bigger picture of the whole thing. 86% of the world's refugees are hosted in the poorest parts of the world. So whilst the numbers that we are seeing this summer may seem large, they are nothing compared to what's going on in the region. So if you look at Turkey, Kenya, and people have been living in what we call protracted refugee contexts for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, essentially stuck in limbo.
The protracted bit means they're stuck in limbo.
They're stuck in limbo without access to rights. And the European Union, Australia, America, and so on, have essentially put in place what we call a containment policy that keeps them there, hence the term Fortress Europe. Right. Then we have what's called secondary containment, and that's born out of the Dublin II. So asylum seekers have to remain in their first country of asylum. Now, obviously, if we're looking at south-north flows, this means that people are going to land either in Malta, Lampedusa, Italy, Greece, Spain, and so on. So there is absolutely no denying that the current scenario puts a disproportionate responsibility on the external border states.
You wouldn't think that by the reporting that's going on in England, by the
way.
No, I mean,
England make
it
they make it
England
sound
was
like they're
freaking
having
out over 3,000 in Calais, whilst, you know, But this is the whole point. Every single member state addresses the issue as if they're the ones that are sinking, because it would also be fair to say that whilst we've had around 20,000 boat arrivals over the last 10 years, the majority left anyway, you know? So what we have in reality is a growing number of undocumented migrants living in the EU who don't have access to rights, simply because we completely failed to develop some kind of common European asylum system, and instead have essentially adopted an approach that is simply throw money around, build up the walls, build up the fences, and as long as it doesn't touch our country, we're happy to keep it at bay. But we can't do that anymore.
Question for both of you ladies, because we're coming to the end of this part of the show, I can't believe it. But to summarise how both of you would see change, how would, if you had a message, just a few words that you would, we've talked about humanisation of the issues, we've talked about relating to people, we've talked about children. If you were to say, you know, how can we change this perception? How can we make this work here? How would you summarise that in just a few words?
I'll go first because I tend to be more up, and maybe Alba can humanise it a little bit more for me. But I would say two things. I would say three things. I call us homo migratus. We have always migrated. This is never going to stop. And all we're seeing is an intensification of migration. And I've been saying this for this same line. People are going to say, oh, for God, there she goes again. But because I keep repeating myself. But you might like migration. You might not like migration. But migration is, and it will not stop. So the question is not about fences. It's about how do we address this new reality?
Right.
Because it is a new reality. An intensification, a shift, if you like, it is globalization. It's new, but we cannot avoid it, and it's not new. The other thing is, as long as there is inequity, people will move. And as Maltese, we know this. When we faced poverty, we moved. And people have been doing that all the time. Where there is more equality, people are much more likely, where human rights are respected, people are far less likely to flee in order to save their lives.
And for you, Alba?
I mean, obviously I agree fully with Maria, and I'd probably add on to a matter of equity. Maybe a lot of people, I think, have a difficulty with identifying, you know, or thinking about how, you know, if it could actually happen to them. And I often ask this to people, like, what would you do if it happened to you? But I think there's one thing that we don't think about enough. It's not just equity, but it's also is opportunity. And we don't think about the fact that we criticize people for moving for opportunity if they're not necessarily asylum seekers. So we look down on them for that, but we do it all the time. We move for studies, we move for work, because we have a saturated job market and settings.
And for sunshine, in my case.
But I definitely think that, at least in my work and in the way I see things, and it may sound maybe to some people a bit like too happy-clappy, but I do like to think that you should treat people the way you'd like to be treated. And the fact of, you know, lending an arm, lending a hand to somebody is not a matter of charity. And this is probably my bigger message. We don't do things because we pity other people. We shouldn't do things because we pity other people, because we don't want it done to us. But we should do things because everyone around us has the same rights. So if I am involved in something, if I'm involved in the issue of migration, it's because I believe in social justice, like Maria, and it's something that we all want for ourselves, so why can't we necessarily want that for the people who live around us? Because a community is what it is because of all the people who live in it. And if you go back to the topic of inclusion, you know, a community is not going to be healthy unless we take care of everybody who's in it.
Thank you.
Ladies, this has been such an important conversation that we've had, and it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to have you on the show this evening, and we're wishing you both the very best. Well, don't go anywhere because we're going to carry on talking in a minute. But I do wish both of you the very best in what you're doing, and hopefully for Malta as well.
Yes. So please join us on Sunday, where you can catch some of the conversation we're going to have now over a glass of wine, and the following Friday, where we're going to speak to some more fantastic women on a different topic.
Absolutely, and if you want to catch anything that we discussed this evening or any of the other shows on InDemand, go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/InDemand TV Malta.
This has been InDemand. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you Sunday.
Ciao.